Hey, and good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Love to hear from you guys. Give us a shout out where you are. And here we are. It's December 16th. It is barreling down on us. The end of this year is, seems like right around the corner. It's going to be a new year here any minute. And I think we need a new year. So that's going to be a good thing. So tell us where you guys are. And we are here to offer shoot support, which means any questions that you have that you run into, difficulties, whatever. You know, we've gathered a bunch, but if you have some that you haven't already put in there, just put them in the chat and we will pick them up a little bit later. I want to address any and all questions that you might have, okay? All right, so there we go. We've got, yes, from London. Yeah, there we go. Levitt. And I'm going to mess up your name. Batteregg, okay. And just in from work. Good. Where are you? Tell us where you are. That's always
I
interesting.
think if I remember correctly, that's John from London,
Oh,
if I
John.
remember correctly.
Okay. All right, John. Good to see you with
Sometimes it's
us.
hard to remember people by their YouTube names, especially when we're so used to
That's right.
talking with them.
Yep. Yes, and thank you from India, Divya. We're spanning the globe here. I love it. Okay. Well, you guys, as you join us, just let us know where you are. All right. Well, listen. Let's get this broadcast started. So I'm Marc Silber. I'm an author, educator, photographer in Carmel, California. And the show is brought to you by our friends at Bay Photo. Again, you can get something amazing printed. I love these guys. We just ordered some prints. Actually, we sent a friend a photograph that I took of her and actually had it framed by Bay Photo and shipped amazingly simple. The color of the frame matched the print really closely. It was actually awesome. 10% off on exposures. Exposure is what I have behind me here. It's this vinyl. They're really cool and they float off the wall. And you can still get your holiday stuff. Better get an order in quick, okay? But you can get various different holiday items, and those are 10% off and 25% off always on your first order. So get something made at Bay Photo. Help yourself, your photography, help us, and help them. Well, all right. So I'm going to tell a little story first of all. All right, Jared, we've got. This is from a trip that we took to Europe a couple of years ago. And you notice I tend to put people in my landscapes now. I wish those clouds were less wispy and more like big thunderheads, but I'm not really one to transplant clouds into my images. You can just keep moving through those, Jared. Yeah, there's another one. This is over. Go back to that last one for a second, just real quick. That's in the Eiger area. I don't remember exactly where we were. It's just unbelievably beautiful there. And these are some of the resident cows there. You can pick up the cows. Go ahead and click on that. Yeah, they were posing for me. I don't have any trouble getting animals to pose for me. I just kind of like, you know, if you're in communication with people or animals, they tend to let you photograph them. And then this was a chapel on the side of the Matterhorn. A couple of climbers heading out. Now I did have the clouds that I was looking for. I love clouds, and they were cooperating with me. Next one is a trail leading up to the Matterhorn, and then of course the last one is the Matterhorn itself. I found those birds to be my punctuation points. Yeah, there they are. And they kind of arced in a perfect way as far as I was concerned. That's just use of a punctuation point. Anyway, at the end of our journey, we ended up in Milan. They were doing Fashion Week there, and there were a lot of different models. This was one of them. My Sony A7R3 battery was dead. It was a goner. You know, I've talked to you guys about making sure your equipment, I didn't have a spare with me. Make sure your equipment is always, you've always got spare batteries. I don't know why I didn't have one. So this was shot on my iPhone. And it actually worked. I did do a little work on the image. I blurred the people in the background just because you can't really control the depth of field on an iPhone, and I would have on my Sony. But I did blur them in the background, and of course I processed that as a black and white. It's got a slight little blur to it in general, and it kind of, for me, that works. It's just sort of like an old-fashioned photograph, maybe a handheld, slow shutter speed. So that was the story there. I was ill-prepared, but I've done this more than once. I've resorted to my iPhone. It's always good to have a backup camera if you can. So anyway, there you go. So I see some more people have joined us. Thank you for Jacob in Poland, and who else is here? Paul, good to see you, Paul, always. And back of me, I don't know who that is. Oh, that's Wayne. Hey, Wayne in Texas. All right. Well, listen, if any of you guys have your own questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get around to them as we progress here. All right, Jared, so who's up first? What's our first question?
All right, so we're kind of going back, looking at some questions that people asked a long time ago before shoot support even existed. So if you see your stuff up here and you're like, wow, that was from a while ago, that's why. But here's a good one. This one's from Ram, and he expressed a problem I see quite a bit. When I look at the photograph, it looks like I copy and pasted the subject into the photo. How do I reduce this effect?
Copy and pasted the subject. That's an interesting way of putting it. So, did you zoom in on that, or did it just?
I clicked on it. Let's
zoom it back. I want to just see the original size. I think the main thing is you've got a lot of space up above him, and I don't know that that's really necessary in the photograph because we're really like trying to see the subject. So I would have moved in a little tighter, or zoomed in, or cropped it a bit. Having headroom is important, but that's an awful lot of headroom. So I don't think to me, it doesn't really help tell the story of that photograph. As far as the cut and paste, there's a lot of light on him. I don't know if you had a reflector or possibly even a little bounce flash. If you're watching this, maybe you could answer that question. It's good to have your subject lit up, so we can see him. But that maybe is what you're referring to. But I think if you were simply to crop out a lot of that headroom, it would improve the image a lot. I don't, as far as the general problem of cut and paste, I'd like some clarification of what you think that is. I'm not totally clear what you're looking at. I guess you feel like his lighting is quite different than the lighting behind. I mean, that's kind of what I see. But why don't you let us know if you're watching, if you did have some kind of reflector or other light source. In that case, I would tone it down just a wee bit, because it's a little bit, he's certainly popping out of there, which is good. And I would use a shallower depth of field to blur out those trees and make the subject more where our center of interest is going anyway. So those would be my suggestions. A little cropping, a little more depth of field. Okay.
All right. Our next one, this is from Thomas. These are his first attempts with street photography, and he's using a Leica M246 and a 50mm lens. And he wanted some feedback.
Leica M246. I don't know what that camera is. I have a Leica M2 right here. You can see that is my trusty Leica M2. Leica M246. I'll have to look it up. So sorry, I'm messing with my screens here. Okay, so let's see. Is there a sequence, Jared, or
There's not particularly a sequence
okay?
because they're three very different photos, but they're all from the same session. So him walking around,
So the question
but they're not
is, how are we
connected in
doing
of
as far as
themselves.
street photography?
Yeah, because this is first attempt at doing street photography. You
Okay,
just kind of
let's click through them again. Okay, that
these three
is in New
photos.
York. Okay, this one I love. It's just it's got a lot going on. The motion of the train, the subway, and the girl with the mask. I think that one really works well. You've captured a COVID moment, and it's kind of interesting because of the Mickey Mouse balloons. Let's look at the other ones. I mean, look, you're doing it, which is great. So I just want to encourage you to keep doing it. This one doesn't have a clear center of interest. We've got three people. The guy with doing this is framed between the two people. One thing that could have helped that is make them, shallower depth of field, make them blur out, so that if we're looking at the guy in the frame with the bull, then let's just focus in on that. And then what's the other one?
It's the last one.
Yeah, interesting. It's a silhouette. It's got interesting geometry to it, leading lines going up the escalator. I don't quite know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at somebody definitely shaded. I might wait a little bit. You see how the light, if you look at the escalator, the next, down, 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 down. Yeah, right there. See how it's lighter? I don't know if this escalator is going up or down. I'm thinking
I think it's going up
okay. Oh, it's going up, and that's the back
because
of the
that looks like
person.
their back.
Okay. Well, I would say keep firing away until you hit one of those brighter spots because you're right in the shade there. So as you go up the escalator, notice how it gets quite a bit brighter there. And also just below the guy, there's some brightness. So I would say keep pressing your shutter. Let's get a little more light on the subject. You're in a very shady spot. So actually, yeah, two more frames up going up the elevator, you're going to have some really nice backlighting. You've definitely got some backlighting going on, but I think you could make the whole figure pop out just by, keep firing away. You've heard me say this before, but a lot of photography is about timing and capturing that decisive moment. You don't always know exactly. You can anticipate it, but as you sense something is here, as you keep pressing the shutter, all of a sudden it's like, oh, there it is. That's the money shot. That's the one I'm looking for. So if maybe you have some of those, you might want to just show them to us at a later point, or you can post them in the AYP Club. All right.
Moving on. Yes. So this is from Julian. This was a while ago. And he had originally done this for critique because shoot support didn't exist, but I thought this would be a great opportunity. So Julian does a online photojournalism course.
Okay.
And this was one of his assignments where he had to do a 5-image story, similar to what he did with those the shots of that tennis court.
Okay, so those were yours too. All right.
So those are his too.
Can we look at these individual? There we go. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's okay. That's it's okay. Go back.
Do you want to just go through each one individually before we show them all?
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to
I'll
show them
make
all?
some
Okay.
comments. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay.
And that's the 5-image story.
Yeah, let's go back to the first one. So you've done a good job of capturing, some close-ups there that we wouldn't be able to see in this wider shot. This she's framed within. I guess that's an easel, and one side, like it's two easels. It kind of looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and the light is really nice on her face, so that works out well. It is a photojournalism thing. We're seeing her at work on this sign. And if you click again, let's just see. I think the sequence, works really well. I really like that. In filmmaking, that's called an insert. It's in photojournalism. I don't think there's a specific name for this shot, but insert means that you're going in tight. You're going in on a close up of something that we've just seen. So if you go back to the other one again, so she doesn't have her pencil, doing exactly that, but we can see she's basically outlining. Yeah. So the next shot shows a close up of that, and that's very effective as a storytelling tool, because now we're seeing, oh, okay, she's putting some details in here, and then yeah, okay, so she's painting, and then we get the detail of the paintbrush. And again, her face is well lit. Yeah, there's some really gooey looking paint that she's doing. So it's effective. You're on the right track. You're telling this story, and then
You can also see that there's been a passage of time too.
oh yeah, good call on that one. Let's go back to the original. Oh
That's
yeah,
the first when she
wow,
starts right at the beginning.
a lot of time has gone by. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dark now. Good call, Jared. So that's interesting. Yeah, she's been at this for a while. There's the blue paintbrush. It's a sequence, and then there she is with the sign. And good, it definitely you're telling those stories, and each frame, to me, basically you're building on a story. So each frame has its own unique part of that story, and it works. What was the original question, though? It's just feedback,
I
or
think it was looking here. He was just looking for some feedback and critique on the 5 image story.
yeah, it works.
And
Definitely.
in particular, the flow, the story, anything else you want to throw in, he said.
I think it flows well. I mean, you did the beginning, and you got you got her at the very beginning. You got these insert shots. Those are very effective. Um, we got that expression on her face, kind of working away. And then the only one, that's probably the one that I'm least crazy about. It's just not particularly interesting. I think maybe the brush on, rather than just kind of gobbing on the side of this, the paint can, maybe the brush applying, paint to a little more of an action shot, I think would make that more interesting. And then the final shot of, let's just see that. Yeah, interesting. I mean, the sign is slightly out of focus. Okay, I don't know. I probably would have left it in focus because it's and blurred the background. So you just have to, change your depth of field a little bit, and where you're focusing. So if you focused in between her and the man and the sign, you'd probably get all three of those elements in focus, and then probably could have blurred out the background. That's just a little pointer. But you're definitely on the right track as far as capturing a series of photographs to tell a story, which is great. I'm all in favor of that.
All right. And then this one is from Anne Marie. Lightroom is new to me, and I'm blown away by the drama it brings in my pictures. Am I pushing it too far?
It's a little bit too far, yes. Just, my advice with the sliders in Lightroom is think of it like seasoning food. A little bit can go a long ways. I can't tell exactly which slider you've moved around here, but your satur is a little bit high on the saturation. I don't know if you're moving vibrancy. You might be moving dehaze. Dehaze is especially, you've got to be really gingerly on that, meaning don't move it too far. But I would tone it down a little bit, just a little bit. It's got a lot of beautiful colors in it already. You don't really need to go too far with those colors. I would be interested to see what it came out of the camera looking like and how much processing it really needed. I'll definitely do a show on processing. I have a kind of a set, not set, but I have a particular workflow. I try to always expand the dynamic range by taking the blacks as far as I can over and the whites as far as I can over, just to open that up. And I usually, will work on the shadows and the highlights, and do very little. I never touch the saturation slider, never ever. I just don't, nor the contrast slider. I've kind of gone away from that. Clarity I'll use, but anyway, it just, I would like to see if you could pop it into the AYP Club, your original unprocessed image, and then I could really answer that question more intelligently for you. But I'm glad you're having fun with Lightroom and discovering its potential.
Okay. I think we got 2 more questions that are from outside, so you probably could get rid of my screen share then.
Okay.
But once again, if anybody else has any questions, you can leave them in AYP Club or put them in the chat here on YouTube if you're watching live. I think the first one was from our AYP Plus class yesterday, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
The question was, what's the difference between AF, which means autofocus, and AE, which means auto exposure? I mean, they're 2 different things. So, but you can lock them in, like on an iPhone. You can lock in by just simply tapping. You'll see the yellow box there. Can you see that very well?
It's pretty hard to see.
Yeah. Anyway, a yellow box appears, and that will actually lock in your focus and exposure. That can be useful. I mean, there's times you definitely need to do that, and most cameras, I think, also have that. It's a tool I don't really use very much, to be honest with you. But our modern cameras have lots of different options. So if you find it to be useful, go for it.
Right.
Yeah. And we had that other question. What was it about?
Yes. So our last question this was from a YouTube comment on a Dan Milner video. I believe he talked about photographs that are one-dimensional.
Right.
And somebody asked, since when are photographs one-dimensional? I think they were thinking in the literal, in
a geometric sense. One-dimensional would mean one line. That would be pretty impossible to have a photograph one-dimensional. This is a 2-dimensional. What we're trying to do is make photographs 3-dimensional as much as we can, and that's using our various tools of angles, focus, that sort of thing. But that isn't what Dan was talking about. So the definition in the Oxford Dictionary, I'm going to just read it here, is so there's 2: having or relating to a single dimension, which is a dot, a point. Okay, a photograph is more than a point. But the other definition is lacking depth or superficial. Not knowing what he said, he could have meant either it didn't have the depth that it could have, like it was flat, in terms of, foreground, middle ground, and background, gives you depth, perspective. There's using leading lines will give you depth. There's a lot of interesting tools. By the way, I'm going to be talking about some of these in our next AYP Plus class, because adding depth generally is something you want to go in the direction of. So he may have been talking about it in that sense, or maybe he thought the photograph was superficial. I don't know. I don't remember the comment. But it's not about geometrically one point, which is again, an impossibility. So there you have it. That's one of those two is what Dan meant. So I guess what we need is if you guys have any burning questions right now, we'll take them up. Otherwise, I can ramble for a minute. But if you guys have, listen, we all run into stuff that can kind of hang up there as far as like, how could I do that, or how could I do it better? And, to me, that's part of the continuous learning experience of photography. I am continually studying to advance my own photography, and a lot of that I will bring to you. For example, I just finished reading a book on filmmaking, which is excellent, and I took copious notes. By the way, one of my notebooks, you might be interested, I have different size notebooks, but this is a section under my notebook. I think I put it under filmmaking. Here it is, where I take notes, not just handwritten, but also typed notes. So these were my notes from studying that book on filmmaking. And this is from every single chapter. I basically summarize what was in that chapter. These are really detailed notes that I will refer to over and over again. And then, so I condensed each chapter. It was actually made relatively easy because there was a summary at the end of every chapter. So really, I was able to cut and paste those summary notes. But then I put in my own in addition to that. Then I went back through it and I summarized my summary down to, this is many pages. I summarized my summary down to about maybe half of what was in there, almost like a checklist. And that really helps me when especially because I'm trying to make sure I've got it really clear, because I want to go out and use it first of all, but I also want to be able to teach it. Then I found some excellent videos, which I'm going to share with the AYP Plus class, about different camera angles. And I found that in general, the film world has figured out some incredible details that aren't actually that well clearly defined in still photography. And the reason for that, I believe this is the reason, is that, in a film shoot, in a movie production, you're talking about millions of dollars that could be wasted because of a bad camera angle, or you have to reshoot it or whatever. A still shoot, yeah, you're probably going to pull it off some way or another, but in a film, it so much relies on these camera angles and various shots to tell the story, you just can't afford to mess it up. And I think because of that, there's been a lot more, groundwork done and explanation. But these things are really applicable to us as still photographers as well. And I'm going to talk about angles. I learned a bunch of new things. Listen, I got through, I thought I had it all wired in this book on composition with 83 compositional tools, and I found another, 4 or 5 just recently. So the list goes on. But my point is, that constant study and urge to, advance your own photography is what this show is built on. And I'm just telling you, I do that myself. Rachel's got a question here. Let's pop it on the screen here. So here it is. How valuable is preparation for creating images? Well, that is a big question. Ansel Adams used an expression that he got from Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur, we're going through this pandemic, and people, before milk was pasteurized, it would, milk has bacteria in it, and you can have bad bacteria that makes you sick. So he figured out pasteurization and how to get rid of that. And he said, chance favors the prepared mind. Ansel Adams then recoined that expression, chance favors the prepared photographer. Many examples of that. So, Rachel, preparation is invaluable. There's no substitute for it. But there's lots of different ways to prepare. There's, like I saw your series that you just posted in AYP Club, or AYP Plus, rather. And you mentioned that you'd done a lot of scouting and you'd done a lot of preparatory work. So when you were out photographing that family, it looks like you knew where to go. That's a really valuable part of preparation. Shot lists are definitely important, especially when you have to come back with certain photographs, no matter what. Like in a wedding, you cannot miss the shot of Aunt Mildred or Uncle Harry, or even the cousin who you didn't know was going to be there, because people are going to be upset if they're left out of the wedding photos. So one trick for that is you interview your couple before the shoot, and you make sure you get a list of every single person that's going to be there, who's on the wedding list, and you type that list out so that when you are in the day of the wedding shoot, you have captured a photograph absolutely for sure with every one of them. Because Aunt Mildred is not going to like it if she had gone to the bathroom when there was a group photo and she wasn't included in it. Now, okay, she could live with that, but later you had an opportunity to shoot Aunt Mildred and you didn't include that. You see, you got to have a shot list, and that's preparation. There's lots of ways to prepare. Research is really important. Like if you're going to an area that you're not familiar with, find out about it. There's lots of ways to do research. You can Google, ahead of time and find out some of the key landmarks and where do people go? Where do they photograph? One of our guests recommended going and, you arrive at a certain location, go look at the postcards that are for sale. Not that you want to take a photograph of those, but at least you're getting an idea what are the iconic shots, and just they actually, I think, recommend just buy a bunch of those postcards so you have them. They're like your reference point. So there's a lot of ways to prepare. Of course, having your equipment ready, and I gave you my example of my dead batteries. That's not preparation, so that you can lose shots. The other way of preparing is practicing. Don't forget the need to practice. Like in sports, we know there's going to be a lot of practice. What's the ratio between playing a sport, a 2-hour football game, let's say, and how much preparation goes into that? I mean, it's 20 to 1 or 40 to 1. Same thing with music. Top musicians are constantly practicing no matter what. They're already the best in the world, but they keep practicing. They don't want to lose their dexterity. They don't want to have that slight lag because, they got rusty. Have you had that experience? Have any of you had that experience where you just haven't gone out to shoot for a while and you go get your camera and it's like, oh man, yeah, I got to remember my card and then this and the batteries. But constant practice is really what overcomes that. That's a long answer, but I hope that helps. Yes.
Divya has a really good question, which if you want to put that up, so I am not able to get correct exposure for different skin tones in videos and photos. How do I get the right exposure for different skin tones for portrait and videos?
Getting the exposure either way is basically the same. So I don't know what trouble you're running into exactly, but your metering in your camera will give you a good start. but you've got, key tool is your histogram. So as long as you're shooting in RAW and you haven't gone to the point where you've got blown out highlights, and we were talking about this in the AYP Plus class. It's so important to preserve your highlights, because if you have, and you can do the skin tone adjustment once you get into your editing software. And I'll give you a kind of a guideline on that. But capturing, make sure you're not blowing anything out, and use your histogram so that you can see visually. Histo means pole, or actually means a mast. Histogram means it's like a picture of a mast, and that's why you have these lines going up like that, and they'll show you your exposure if it's right. Because if you're blown out, it'll be all the way over here and it goes off. You're going to lose that information. You can't do anything about it. Can't get it back. Now when you're editing, to try, this is, I think, a different question, so I'm not going to get too far into this. But then you've got your, how should this person's skin look? You've got your various different tools in your editing, but make sure you've captured it correctly. Use your histogram. Short answer.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, they had a follow-up where they said, I've noticed I tend to underexpose so that I can prevent the highlight from clipping, but that makes the skin tone in the subject dark.
Okay, well, use your histogram. Shoot in RAW, for sure. I don't know I hope you're shooting RAW, not without your clothes on. I actually had a woman in a workshop in the Midwest. I was talking about, you got to make sure you shoot RAW. And she's like, wait a minute, you want me? She did not know what RAW was. Anyway, use your histogram, expose correctly, and you can do the rest in your editing software. Okay. Do we have any others here?
Yeah, we had somebody who was asking about tips for lighting wedding receptions, which is, an area where maybe you don't have as nearly as much control in setting up, the lighting. You don't always know. I mean, you'll know the venue ahead of time, but
yeah, you should know the venue, and you should also, when you're scouting, you want to, when you're shooting an important event like a wedding, you can't mess up your shots, and this is true any kind of shot. You got to scout, not just location, because you're going to want to know. You have to move fast. You don't have a lot of time to mess around, so you're going to want to know, where do we want these people to stand? They're waiting for you to direct them. Don't take their direction. They could stand against a pole, so it's coming out of the back of someone's head. You are the director. So every director needs to take charge. That's what directing means. And they have to look at the setting itself. They have to look at the lighting. And does the lighting work or not? If it's really shadowy, it's going to look not flattering, right? So you would scout this out ahead of time and possibly supplement the lighting if you have to, because if it's really dark and it's going to look bad, then you got to fix it. You're responsible for everything in the frame. Remember that. This is good, good point as far as what Rachel was bringing up, is scouting is super important. Again, in filmmaking, everything is scouted. Everything is scouted ahead of time before the shoot. You don't scout on the day of the shoot. If it's a large production, it's going to be scouted days or weeks ahead of time to make sure that things like the location will really work and will the lighting work. So you're going to be shooting a nighttime wedding, let's say, and it's going to be dark. Well, immediately in your planning, you have to think, how am I going to work with that? I don't want a bunch of shadowy, people. So you're going to have to come with supplemental lighting, or know where decent lighting is going to be. If you're relying on fluorescent lighting in the room, that's not going to be great. So these are all the things you have to take into consideration. And it's challenging. The less time you have, the more of a challenge it is. So, pre-planning.
Go ahead.
That's it. I'm done.
All right. We got a question from Media Studio 5. What happened? So they kind of have a statement. They want to know your thoughts on it. So what happened when photographers lost the concept of what to photograph and we began to focus mostly on how photograph? We lost the philosophy and became part of branding and marketing. And they kind of wanted to know your thoughts on that idea.
Okay, what to photograph, and we became focused mostly on how to photograph. We lost, you probably have noticed I tend to go in that direction of, how to photograph can also give you what to photograph, I think, because if you learn your tools, like if composition will open your eyes, for instance, lighting will open your eyes to what to photograph. So I do believe those two things fit together. They're not like separate, because the more tools you have at your disposal, and by tools I don't just mean cameras, but compositional tools, lighting tools, and the most important tool of all is you behind the camera and how you relate to your subject. Super important. And your ability to observe. Those are tools that are invaluable, because who runs the camera? You. And it's like a camera does not take the picture, does not capture the picture. It's you using that camera. So if you know how to work your camera and you know how to visualize a shot, and you know what you can do with lighting, and you understand angles and various compositional tools, that's gonna give you what to photograph, I believe, because those tools all add up to how can I make a story out of this image? How can I tell you what I saw and hand it over to you? Photography is a communication means just as much as me speaking with my mouth. I don't have to speak to tell something to you. That's gesturing, but in a photograph, we are presenting a story. And you're saying, this is what I saw, this is what I feel. Now, the other part of it became part of the branding and marketing. I guess that could happen. I don't know if what specifically you're referring to is.
Maybe they're thinking kind of the Instagram effect of doing what's popular.
I see what you're saying.
That might be the idea that they're kind of going with.
Yeah,
as far as branding and marketing, what's popular?
What's popular? Okay, yeah. Well, just stay true to your own, where you want to go with it. It would be my best advice. And I think we're all looking for what's our voice, what's the message we want to get out, what unique statement can we make to the world. And that's what you can do with your photography. And I agree with you. If it's all driven by likes, that's why Dan Milner isn't on social media anymore. That's kind of your extreme. You can do that, or you could just say, I'm going to put up stuff that I believe is my best work, and comments, likes, whatever, that's really secondary too. Picture some of these iconic photographers. Ansel Adams. Now, okay, there was obviously no social media, but did he change what he was photographing because of opinions? It's a hard question to answer, because he obviously liked feedback from his work, and I'm sure that he took it into consideration. But I don't think it changed his style of photography at all. What the other people thought. I think he had a very clear idea what he wanted to do with his photography, and he presented that to the world. And he was able to influence people through his photography. He was a very big environmentalist and wanted to preserve our natural resources, and he used his photography to bring that about. Different photographers have a certain message that they're carrying forward, and they use their photography as a way to help other people see what they see. And that's a key point. What story are you trying to tell with that photograph, and how can you tell it better? That's kind of the name of the game. All right, well, do we have one
yeah, we
or
got
two
a couple.
more?
We got a couple more questions.
They're just coming in,
Paul,
folks.
yeah.
Paul.
Paul asked, tech question: if shooting in RAW, should I use Adobe or RGB? So Adobe RGB or sRGB?
That's a good one, Paul. You have a lot of choices. Those, okay, so depending on where you're going to put that, first of all, when you're shooting in RAW, you don't have to make that decision. It's in your processing where you're going to make that decision. RAW is RAW. You're going to capture that image, and you can make those changes. Depending on where that photograph is going to be used, you can decide what color space, which is what those you're talking about. Like if it's going to a printer, usually they will specify how they want that output to occur. Like when I do my books, my designer says, okay, this is how I want you to export the photographs, like this. So you would basically, check where the photograph is going. Is it going to be used on screen? Is it going to be put in a print? And then get into it. I don't want to actually it's a big subject as far as these color space points. So, there's a lot of data out there. You can Google it. But that's fortunately a decision you can make in your processing.
All right, I think we got time for two more questions. I think this first one's pretty quick. It's from Rachel. It seems hard to pull out detail in underexposed images. Am I wrong, or do I just need to learn how to do it right?
Well, yes, you're right. It's I was going to try to find that where is that question? I don't see it, but
it's up in the chat. It's above one of my comments.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's pop that on there. So hard to pull out detail in underexposed. Yeah, of course. So again, use your histogram. Find out you have to decide what's important to you. So if you're exposing for the highlights, you may lose detail in the dark areas. Is that important to you or not? If it is, then you got exposed for that area. More likely than not, it's not the important information that you're after. And you also have HDR where you can expand. I'm not a big HDR user, and I'm not going to recommend it or not. I mean, it's a tool. But Rachel, it's really a matter of what is the important information in that photograph. Highlights in digital photography are usually what you want to make sure you preserve, because once you blow those highlights out, it's just not going to look good. You're not going to be able to get it back. If you lose some detail in the darker areas, is that important? Probably not. In fact, Bob Holmes likes to lose the detail because he wants that area to kind of go off into sort of a mystery, like what is behind that? And we're going to hear him talk about that, by the way. On Friday, we got Bob Holmes back. We're going to talk about this stuff because he brings it up. I'm going to ask him to explain what does it mean to learn to shoot what the camera sees, not what you see, and how do you do that? But this is a question we'll throw over to Bob. But it's using your histogram is going to preserve what you consider important, and that's really all there is to that. It's a great tool. I use my exposure compensation knob all the time because there you go. Like you can see that it's sliding off over this way and I'm losing the highlights. I just turn my exposure compensation knob, and that, maybe a stop over, I bring it back and I've got all the information I need. Just think of it like you got to record when you're shooting raw. You've got to record the image so that you can take it back and process it. That's the same thing as in the darkroom days. If you had an underexposed or an overexposed negative, there's only so much work you can do with it in the darkroom. If that information is not there, it's not there. You can't bring it back if it wasn't exposed correctly to begin with. So that's, again, before we had histograms, we used our light meter, and we really had to judge, what exposure, what am I going for on my exposure, and move your light meter around to the spot that you consider important. We used to use our hands, as a reference point, since the light could reflect off of that, and you point your light meter at your hand if I was trying to capture something along the lines of skin tone, my skin tone. But, again, it's easier with modern cameras because you have this incredible tool in the histogram. The histogram is just think of it as a part of your light meter, and it's an amazing tool. It really helps you dial in on exactly how to get your exposure right. All right, did you say we had one more, or is that?
Yeah, we got one more, one that I think you'll enjoy because it's very much in your wheelhouse.
Oh, I love it.
Dave Maloney asks, any advice on how to train yourself to look and see what others miss, the art of seeing?
I give Dave, every one of my classes in the master class, I begin with an exercise of observing. It's really important. And the way you train yourself is paying attention, noticing what's going on in your environment right now, in present time. Unfortunately, when we get hit with stuff, it can tend to throw us out of present time. You know how you can be somewhere but not really be there? Everything's kind of blurry and fuzzy because you're really thinking about stuff that happened a month ago or a day ago or 10 minutes ago or what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's like seeing what's right here and now is not just a photography tool, but it's a way of life, and it leads to a happier life. Why do I recommend walks? Yesterday I was really bummed out. Something happened. I didn't like it. I was actually upset about it. And I use walks as my way to clean the junk of life. Life is going to throw things at you. It's not, you can't avoid it. I mean, you can. There's things you can do to, but why do we have windshield wipers on our car? Because rain, bird dew, dust, dirt, all that stuff is going to fog up your windshield if you never... Imagine driving your car around, never washing the windows, and never using the windshield wipers. After a while, it's a pretty foggy view. Well, one of the windshield wipers of life is going on walks. And I've already told you, you can increase your creativity by 60%, but you can clear away all the debris. And in those walks, don't sit there and look at your phone because that's counterproductive. Look out. Look at the environment. Look at the trees. Look at the birds. Look at the dogs running around. Whatever. And you're wearing your mask, great. That's fine. Do all that. Look outward. And it's the simplest tool to increase your creativity and your peace of mind. And on that note, I'm going to leave that with you. I want everybody on this broadcast to make sure they take a long enough walk. One swipe of the windshield wiper may not clean the windows. Maybe you got to spray it off get that squeegee, really get all the gunk off of it. That might be a longer walk. And walk until you feel refreshed and you really start noticing things on your walk, and you can feel it. Your mind actually frees up and it's like, oh, okay, I feel better now. Okay. So simple, but this is a creative tool that's really important. And thanks for that question. That is definitely in my wheelhouse. And I think on that note, Jared, unless there's one last one.
I don't think that we would be able to cover here
Okay.
in the next couple minutes.
So, okay, guys, so we're coming around towards the end of the year. We're going to have some changes come the first of the year. We're going to change our schedule around a little bit. I just booked if you've read my book, Create, it's around here somewhere, you know that I have creative conversations with 12 very talented people. I mean, we're talking about Grammy Award winners. We're talking about TED Talk guys. We're talking about actors and amazing people, inventors. And anyway, I just booked. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. Incredible author. He was one of Paul McCartney's best friends. When Paul McCartney was starting with the Beatles, he was living in his family home for 2 years. And Paul would come home and, hey, listen to this. And he'd play like yesterday, It's like, what? Anyway, we're going to have him on the show, Creative Conversation. We've got some other incredible photographers coming up. But this week, tomorrow, absolutely do not miss our critique show tomorrow at 10 a.m. Okay, put your photos inside AYP. And then, of course, Bob Holmes, 10 o'clock on Friday. Bring your questions. The masterclass has first dibs. They've got a front row seat to ask Bob any question. So we're going to take them. And if we get only their questions, that's fine because they deserve that. But I've got a bunch of questions I've kind of saved up for Bob myself. And that's kind of our news this week. We're playing with this right now, but we're going to run another holiday special, year-end special, give you guys some great discounts on our courses, the memberships. It's not going to go as low as it was on Black Friday. I'm sorry, you're not going to have that again, but we're going to give you some year-end discounts so that you can, maybe you have a friend who's a photographer, you want to buy a class for them for Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever, do it. That's coming around. And I think, Jared, that's about it, right?
Yeah, I think that's it.
I should have done this earlier. I was
just going to say.
Remind you to subscribe so you don't miss any of our shows. Enable the bell. We're here for you. Like, share, leave your comments. I always, I read them. Sometimes it's just an emoji. I don't really have much that I need to say. But, questions. And if we have a guest on, like Dotan Sagai, we publish one of his videos and he'll answer those questions too. So definitely do that. And remember, you guys, say it with me, wherever you are in the world, remember to get out and capture your own images of life. Love you guys. Thanks for joining us. It really means a lot to me. Stay well, stay safe, stay creative, and capture life. And we'll see you tomorrow.